I'm just dying to talk about um, a passage in the Riders of Rohan, but I know I sent that video where Aragorn talks with Éomer about walking in the world of legends and such, but we don't have time. I do real quickly since I just flipped to it. Page 438. We're gonna begin with the White Rider, so consider this a preface. Or cheating. Page 438, right in the middle of the page. Éomer asks, "How shall a man judge what to do in such times?" Because he's like, everything stops eternity. The sword that was broken is back. People have spoken to the Lady of the Golden Wood and they still live. How shall a man judge what to do in such time? Aragorn, as he ever has judged. Good and ill have not changed since yesteryear. Now, probably Tolkien's Catholicism speaking. Good and evil are absolutes. There is absolute good, there is absolute evil. That does not mean there aren't shades of gray and shades of white that lead to the absolute, right? Nor are they one thing among elves and dwarves and another among men. That is, Tolkien's Aragorn, let me put it this way. Aragorn's not a relativist. Aragorn doesn't say, what's good for one tribe, one group, may not be necessarily the good for another group. He's saying no. Good is good, whether you are a dwarf, an elf, a human, etc. Right? It is a man's part to discern them. And that is straight from the Old English poem Beowulf. In the Old English poem Beowulf, there's a coast guard, a guy who stands at the coast and watches to make sure enemies don't come ashore. And he says, a good coast guard or good warrior has to be able to determine or discern between words and deeds. Because people will come, and I've got to be able to determine when that person speaks to me, is he able to fulfill what it is he says? That is, if he comes making a boast, I've got to be able to determine, can he actually do what he says? Or is it just words? Right? It is a man's part to discern them, that is, good from ill, as much in the golden wood, Lothlorien, as in his own house. That is, the golden wood's kind of like in Fantasyland and fairyland, as much as it is in his own house, in the everyday, mundane aspect of living. You got to be able to tell good from ill. Okay? So, go on, chapter 5. The White Rider. So they go to where they see the smoke rising from the bodies of orcs that Éomer and his riders of the Rohirrim have burned. Okay? Just beyond the edge of Fangorn Forest. And they find hobbit tracks that lead into Fangorn. So they go into the forest. Right? And Legolas says, 491, keep in mind, what kind of elf is Legolas? He's a tree elf. So trees are really important. Trees are important to all elves. But there are elves that are also elves that live at the seaside. Galdor from the Grey Havens, Círdan from the Grey Havens, for example. Legolas, it is old, very old. So old that almost I feel young again, as I have not felt since I journeyed with you children. You are a wood elf, says Gimli, though elves of any kind are strange folk. Yet you comfort me. That is, okay, I feel a little better with you around. Where you go, I will go. Legolas, the implication is Legolas wants to go off and explore this wood. Obviously he can't, because they have a job to do at this point. Find Merry and Pippin if they can. Okay? Where you go, I will go. That's a paraphrase, or it's a snippet from the Old Testament book of Ruth, where Ruth, I always get these two mixed up. Ruth says to her daughter-in-law Naomi, whithersoever where you go, I will go. That is, I will go wherever you go. Okay? But keep your bow ready to hand. He says, and I'm going to keep my axe ready. So they see an old guy through the forest, comes up to him. Remember, the previous night they saw another old guy, okay? And they talk with him for a little bit, and the old man tells Legolas, middle of 493, put away your bow. He tells Gimli, put away your axe. Okay? And he jumps quickly up on top of this rock, and they see him and speak with him. Aragorn says, you act like you know Fangor. He says, yes, I do. Page 494, middle of the page. The old man turns away to go, and his garment, the cloak that he's wearing, kind of opens up a little bit. Now it's this old, tattered, gray thing. And they see this gleaming white underneath. The gray cloak drew apart, and they saw beyond doubt he was clothed beneath all in white. Gimli, Saruman. Okay? And a whole bunch of things happened simultaneously. The old man was too quick for them. He sprang to his feet, leaped to the top of a large rock. There he stood, grown suddenly tall, towering above them. His hood and his gray rags were flung away. His white garment shone. He lifted up his staff. Gimli's axe leaped from his grasp. So, on its own, jumps, fell ringing to the ground. The sword of Aragorn stiffened his motionless hand, blazed with a sudden fire. Legolas gave a great shout, shot an arrow high into the air that vanished in flame, and he says, Mithrandir, Mithrandir, the Elvish name for Gandalf. Aragorn, beyond all hope, you return to us in our need. That is, eucatastrophe. It is a sudden and miraculous grace never to be counted to recur. What veil was over my sight? Gandalf goes, yeah, I was called Gandalf. Gimli, but you're all in white now. Notice, you are all in white. What's Gimli saying? You're clothed in white. Okay? Gandalf. Notice Gandalf, here's what Gimli says and rephrases it. Yes, I am white now. He doesn't say I'm in white. He says, I am white. Okay? He's not just referring to color. What's he referring to? Totally other. I am.
I mean, in the beginning, wasn't he called Gandalf the Grey?
Yes, he was. Pure. Totally good. Doesn't mean that before his Gandalf the Grey, he wasn't totally good. But he's going to recount something that's happened to him. And this is why he's now Gandalf the White. Okay? He says, indeed, I am Saruman. One might almost say Saruman as he should have been. In other words, I am what Saruman should have aimed to. He's talking about transformation. Okay? Think of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Not the Sorcerer's Stone. We'll talk about why that's an utterly asinine, stupid word that the American editor replaced philosopher with. Replaced for philosopher. Saruman as he should have been. That is, Saruman, if he'd done what he should have done, he would have become like what I am now. Because bear in mind, when Saruman became Saruman of many colors, what did Gandalf say in response? What actually happened to him? He that would break a thing to find out what it is has left the path of wisdom. Saruman went from being Saruman the White to Saruman of many colors. He's no longer white. He's now what? Think Lord Voldemort. fragmented. He's broken. He has divided himself. Okay? So, he says, I have passed through fire and deep water since we parted. He's passed through more than that he'll tell him in a few minutes. I have forgotten much that I thought I knew, and learned again much that I had forgotten. Forgotten much that I thought I knew. Why? Louder?
Maybe it was wrong.
Or could be that, what he thought he knew was actually something he didn't know. Or what else? It was unimportant. Irrelevant. Okay? And learn much that I had forgotten. That is, learn much that I had once known. Okay? So, he says, what have you guys been up to? So they sit and they talk, and let's see here. Pick up a bit. 498.99. He tells them about the Ents. He tells them about Treebeard, or Fangorn himself. Okay? 499. They ask, where are Merry and Pippin? With the Ents. With Treebeard and the Ents. Aragorn. The Ents? Then there is truth in the old legends about the dwellers in the deep forest and the giant shepherds of the trees. Are there still Ents in the world? I thought they were only a memory of ancient days, if indeed they were ever more than a legend out of Rowan. What did he just, less than a day before, tell Eomer about legends? We walk in and among legends, he tells him. How so? Because the deeds that are done today become the legends of tomorrow. I mean, think about it. Think about, how, well, I shouldn't use this example because it's not taught anymore. The Constitutional Convention back in 1787 and following, or the other convention leading up to the writing of the Declaration, Continental Congress in 1776. We talk about those days almost like they're legendary. Why? Because what happened there had never happened before. I think 20, 50, it's even somewhat now, but even more so, 20, 30, 40 years, what happened, on 9/11 with those firefighters and cops running towards the towers are going to become even more legendary. Or even in the beginning of the war in Afghanistan with those special forces troops riding in with the Northern Alliance, literally riding in on horseback. It's going to become even more legendary. And Aragorn's here going, well, I thought those were just mere legends. What's he mean by legends? Fake. Wives' tales. Fairy tales. Legolas, a legend? Nay, every elf in Wilderland has sung songs of the old Onodrim and their lone sorrow. If I were to meet one still alive, still walking in this world, then I would feel young. Actor who plays Legolas, Orlando Bloom. He don't look very old, does he? I mean, he wasn't very old. He's like 21, 22 when he did this movie. Hundreds of years, at least. You can go back and look in the back of the book somewhere and find out how old he is. He's old. Gandalf. In response to Legolas, who is this Treebeard? Treebeard is a name in the common speech. It's not the Elvish name. Okay? He's essentially saying, Gandalf, call him by his real name. Treebeard is Fangorn. The whole entire forest is named after this one shepherd of the trees. The guardian of the forest, he is the oldest of the Ents, the oldest living thing that still walks beneath the sun upon this middle earth. Shouldn't there be an asterisk there? Because who does that not include? Tom Bombadil, who says, I am the eldest. I was here before the trees, before the rain, before the darkness came from the outside. So why might there not be a need for an asterisk? How does Gandalf qualify this eldest? The oldest living thing that still walks beneath the sun. See, it could be possible that Tom Bombadil doesn't only walk beneath the sun. If my theory is right, and that Tom Bombadil is an earthly manifestation, epiphany of the real Ilúvatar, then in the Orthodox Church we talk about the Holy Spirit existing in all places at every time. Then that could apply to Tom Bombadil. Right? So, they keep talking, and Gimli says about what Gandalf has said about Fangorn, but you speak of him as if he was a friend. I thought Fangorn was dangerous. He says he is dangerous. So am I. And so are you, and so is Aragorn, and so is Legolas, etc. Okay? So Legolas says, so what are the Ents going to do? Right? And let me back up just a second. Gandalf says, top of page 500, the coming of the hobbits and the tidings that they brought have spilled it. What is the it? It is the anger, his wrath, his long, slow wrath, the long, slow wrath of Treebeard. It will soon be running like a flood, but its tide is turned to get Saruman and the axes of Isengard. A thing is about to happen which has not happened since the elder days. The Ents are going to wake up and find that they are strong. Okay? What will they do? Yeah, I don't know. But notice, it's the hobbits that awaken. It's the hobbits that awaken that long, slow wrath that lights the match. So, they're like, before we go on, we've got more questions. And Gandalf tells Aragorn, middle of page 500, come, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, do not regret your choice in the valley of Emyn-Muil, nor call it a vain pursuit. What was that choice? Anybody remember? After they buried Boromir, well, put Boromir in the boat and sent him down the river. What's the choice? Follow Frodo and Sam into Mordor, or follow Merry and Pippin, who are being held by the orcs. Frodo and Sam aren't being held by the orcs. They took one boat, punched holes in the bottoms of the others. So they, at least when they left, they were safe. Merry and Pippin are being held by orcs, man. That's about the most horrible thing you can imagine happening. He says, don't regret that choice. The choice was just, it has been rewarded. For so we have met in time, who otherwise might have met too late. If you hadn't chosen to follow Merry and Pippin, we might not have met. He says, so here's what you have to do. You gave your word to Éomer, right? To do what? Take the horses, go back to Meduseld. Show yourself to King Theoden. Legolas, are we not going to see the hobbits? I did not say so, Gandalf says. Who knows? Have patience. Go where you must go and hope. That is, do what you must do. Why must they do that? This idea is going to come up later when Aragorn talks to Éowyn. Because Aragorn gave his word. Okay? He agreed to do something. He can't just change his mind suddenly. So, Gandalf says, will you come with me? That is, I've got to go to Medicine. I've got to talk to Theoden. Aragorn says, yes, I will. And then we're told, top of 501. The others gazed at them, that is, Legolas, Gimli, gazed at Aragorn and Gandalf in silence as they stood there facing one another. The great figure of the man, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, tall, stern stone, hand upon the hilt of the sword, looked as if some king out of the mist of the sea, blah, blah, blah. Before him stooped the old figure, white, shining now as if with some light kindled within. It's like the light is shining out of his eyes, out of his ears, out of his nose. You know, we won't go other places. Before, bent, laden with years, but holding a power beyond the strength of kings. And Aragorn says, do I not say truly, Gandalf, that you could go with us wherever you wish quicker than I? And this I also say, you are our captain on our banner. The Dark Lord has 9, but we have 1. Mightier than they. We have 1. Mightier than the 9 put together, is what he's saying. The White Rider. He has passed through fire and the abyss. What's the abyss? The abyss that the bridge of Khazad-dûm is over. What's the fire? The Balrog. Okay? Unless he's referring to other fire and an other abyss. So, Gandalf says, Aragorn says, we'll go wherever you lead. So Gandalf tells them what happened. And I know we're going to be so far behind. Page 502. He says, we fell, and then we hit the water, went through the water, and then my enemy started climbing up the stair, and I followed after him. He says, we broke out upon the top of the peak of Mount Caravas, and almost the exact middle of page 502. I threw down my enemy, and he fell from the high place and broke the mountainside, where he smote it in ruin. Then darkness took me. I'm trying to understand something in my notes. Parallel with Harry Potter, and I can't read what it says in book 7. Harry Potter and what? Book 7. Lord Voldemort. Oh, okay, I know what it is now. Then darkness took me, and I strayed out of thought and time, and I wandered far on roads that I will not tell. Okay, how do you stray out of thought and time? Coma? You die. That's how. That's the only way you go outside time, is to be dead. Okay? And I wandered far on roads, that is, and I'm not going to tell you what I saw, heard, did, etc. Naked I was sent back. Sent back. If he was sent, there was a sender. Who did the sending? Who addressed the envelope and stuffed Gandalf in it, for a brief time, until my task is done. And what's he mean? Naked I was sent back. And naked I lay upon the mountaintop. Now, I think the word naked has 2 meanings. He means physically no clothes. But I think he also means naked in the sense of unbodied. Okay? Naked I lay upon the mountaintop, the tower behind was crumbled into dust. I was alone, forgotten, without escape, upon the hard horn of the world. There I lay, staring upward. The stars wheeled around, And he heard the rumor of the world. That is, he heard everything. Okay? The parallel with that I wrote, the thing that I couldn't read, KC, King's Cross, in book 7. Okay? I won't say anything else. Those of you who've read it, I don't even remember what, because I've not seen the 7th film, or 8th film, whichever one that would be in, probably 8. So I don't know what they do. So, Gwaihir the Wind Lord comes and rescues him. Why? How does Gwaihir know to look for him? Because Galadriel Galadriel sends him. See, as soon as they tell Galadriel, Gandalf fell at the bridge of Khazad-dûm, she kind of mentally, call it right here and send him. Okay? So, he brings word from Galadriel to each of them. And by the way, the darkness took me, I strayed out of thought and time, wandered on roads. He's probably talking about going off to what are called the halls of Mandos, where he was restored and then sent back. See, in Tolkien's cosmology, when elves die, they go off to the hall, I think, if I have this correctly, when the elves die, they go off to the halls of Mandos, and then they can be reincarnated back into Middle Earth. Very un-Catholic, by the way. Okay? So, he brings word to Aragorn, and she brings this little poem about the paths of the dead. Okay? To Legolas, she brings a warning. If thou hearest the cry of the gull on the shore, thy heart shall not then rest in the forest no more. If you hear the seagull at the ocean shore, you will never have peace in trees again. Why? He'll be called to go over the sea, to go to the land of Valinor. Okay? And then he's silent and shuts his eyes, probably, Gimli. Nothing for me? Just that old elf dwarf, antagonism again? Legolas, Gimli, be happy. That's no comfort. Would you have her speak openly to you of your death? Yeah, she didn't have anything else to say. Gandalf, sorry, forgot. To Gimli, son of Glóin, give his ladies greeting. Lock-bearer. Wherever thou goest, my thought goes with thee. But have a care to lay thine axe to the right tree. What's that mean? Wherever you go, my thought goes with you. I'm always thinking of you, Gimli. Okay? Bear in mind, everywhere he goes, what does he carry with him? Literally, 3 strands of her hair. The hair grows on her head. It's connected to her thought, so to speak. So wherever you go, I'm there with you. That's not like the words that she gave to Aragorn and Legolas. In happy hour you have returned to us, Gandalf, cried the dwarf, capering as he sang loudly in the strange dwarf tongue. What's it mean to caper? Go up to one of the Celtic bars in Nashville or Franklin. Can't remember the names of them. And every now and then they'll have what's called, see if I can remember how to spell it, something like that, a ceilidh. Bring out the fiddles, bring out the alien pipes and such. It's a dance. So he starts like dancing a jig around. Okay? So they go to chapter 6, King of the Golden Hall. In page 508, and I always forget to do this, they find these barrows, and Aragorn sings a speech, sings some lines, this poem. Where now the horse and the rider? Where is the horn that was broken, blowing? Where is the helm and the hauberk and the bright hair flowing? Blah, blah, blah. Okay? And what they do in the film is really, really good. Because the language that Aragorn will sing this in, because we'll hear it first, before he does it in the common speech, it's the language of Rohan. And it turns out the language of Rohan is Old English. So we hear that in the Old English. And those lines are very similar to a passage from the Old English poem, The Wanderer, which I have a note here. Bring in the Old English, and I always forget it. Okay? So, they go to Meduseld, and they have to leave their weapons outside. Gandalf's like, I'm an old man, I need my stick to what? So he's allowed to carry his staff in. Page 514. He throws his cloak aside. So now they see him all in white, and he still has his staff, and he speaks in a loud voice, page 514. Because Wormtongue has said some unwise things about Galadriel. And Gimli challenges him, and Gandalf then sings some words, and he says, the wise speak only of what they know, Grima, son of Galmad, a witless worm have you become, therefore be silent, keep your forked tongue behind your teeth. I have not passed through fire, and there we get it. Death. See, before it was fire in the abyss. Now it's fire and death. To bandy crooked words with a serving man till the lightning falls. He raises his staff, there's a crack of thunder, the sunlight's blotted out, and Wormtongue, I told you should have taken his staff, you know. So now we're in this big hall. It's a wood building. Okay? Thatched roof, hole in the center of the roof for the smoke from the fire pit in the middle of the room to rise and go out. So there's smoke in the rafters and such around the building. And Gandalf addresses Theoden. This is totally not like in the movie. And he says, now Theoden, son of Thingol, will you hearken to me? Do you ask for help? And he holds his staff and he points up to a window and he says, look. And we get a little shaft of light coming from there. The rest of the room is almost pitch black. Not all is dark. How much, has the room gone from suddenly like that? No. It's still like, there's an inch of this window showing. It's mostly dark. There the darkness seemed to clear. Through the opening could be seen high and far a patch of shining sky. Not all is dark. Take courage, Lord of the Mark, for better help will you not find. No counsel have I to give to those that despair. Why? Because if you are full of despair, despace, no hope, nothing could be done. He says, but I could give you counsel. Would you hear them? They're not for everybody. And slowly Theoden gets up out of his chair. And notice, as Theoden gets up, what happens in the room? It starts to get lighter. Is that because Gandalf's sitting there going, cue the lights. When he gets up, bring him up gently, gently. Yeah, maybe get a nice soft spotlight on Theoden's face. The woman hastened to the king's side, taking his arm, and with faltering steps, the old man came down from the dais and paced softly through the hall. Wormtongue, spread eagled on the floor. They go to the doors. Gandalf says, open. Lord of the Mark comes forth. The doors are rolled back, and notice a keen air came whistling in. What's a keen air? Cold. Biting. Like, we get every now and then Murphy's-Sparrow in January and parts of February when we'll get a really bad, Arctic clipper, an Alberta clipper comes down from Canada, and we'll get, 15 degrees and 20 mile an hour winds, and you step out the front door and it just boom, hits you in the face. It's like that. Why? It's cleaning out the hall. Gandalf says, send your men away. And he does. And Eowyn goes inside. So now it's just Gandalf and Theoden standing on the porch looking down the steps that kind of lead off into the kingdom. And we're told about Eowyn. Grave and thoughtful was her glance as she looked on the king with cruel pity in her eyes. Very fair was her face. Her hair and her long hair was like a river of gold. Slender and tall she was in her white robe, girt with silver. Strong she seemed, stern as steel, daughter of kings. Thus Aragorn sees, for the first time in the full light of day, Eowyn, Lady of Rohan, thought her fair, fair meaning beautiful, gorgeous, and cold, like an ice cube, like a morning of pale spring that has not yet come to womanhood. And she suddenly was now aware of him, tall heir of kings, wise with many winters, great cloak, hiding of power, and for a moment still a stone, then turning, she goes. So, Gandalf says, look at what you see out in front of you. And we're told, from the porch upon the top of the high terrace, they could see beyond the stream the green fields of Rohan fading into distant gray. Curtains of wind-blown rain were slanting down, off in the distance. Sky above and to the west, still dark with thunder. Right? Lightning far away flickered, but the wind had shifted to the north, and already the storm that had come out from the east. Why from the east? It's more figurative than it is literal, because that's where Mordor is. Right? Had what? Was receding, rolling away southward to the sea. Suddenly, through a rent in the clouds behind them, so they can't see this. If they were to turn around and look back, all they'd see is the building. And if they look straight up, they could see the sky. But they look straight up, they see the clouds. The hole in the clouds is outside their field of vision. Behind them, a shaft of sun stabbed down. In other words, we have happening in the natural world outside what had happened inside the hall. Notice it was dark, and Gandalf, in a little stab of light. The falling showers gleamed like silver. And far away the river glittered like a shimmering glass. Theoden, it is not so dark here. What has he just begun to experience? Louder? Hope? Okay. What else? What do fairy stories provide us adults? Consolation. This is the beginning of recovery. He's beginning to see things as he is meant to see them. How has he been seeing things for years? Why? You're right. Who's been speaking into his ear? Worm tongue. Okay? It's like his tongue has put worms into his mind. And those worms have eaten away at how he ought to see and think. Okay? Now, how is this also consolation? This one little thing of the shaft of light, the gleaming silver, that is a mini eucatastrophe. Okay? It's not so dark here. Gandalf, no, it's not. Nor does age lie so heavily on your shoulders that some would have you think. That is, you don't need that prop. You don't need a stick. Come on, stand up. Joint crack and such. So he drops his staff, and we're told. Bottom of 515, top of 560. Dark have been my dreams of late, but I feel as one, there it is, new awakened. Just like, I don't think I've ever said this. I've been teaching this thing for over 20 years. Just like Gandalf comes back, newly awakened. Okay? I would now that you had come before. Would there means desired, wished. Well, the last time Gandalf was there, how did Theoden receive him? Not very kindly. Take a horse, take any horse. And so Gandalf chooses Shadowfax. Really? You got to take that horse? You got to take the best horse that has ever been, seemingly? Right? what does Peter Jackson do in the film for this? How must Gandalf get Theoden to see clearly? So utterly idiotic because it's trite and it's so stupid. He has him perform an exorcism. He points his wand at him. He goes out of the little crystal thing at the top, which there isn't in this one. And what do we see in the film? We see Saruman's face kind of twisting out of Theoden's head and stuff. And when he finally gets him out, we see Saruman back in his tower in Isengard. You know, it's like a 5-year-old wrote it. Okay, so skip a bunch. Aelmer gets freed, gets his sword back, and they're going to ride off to battle. Chapter 7, Helm's Deep. I've got written on here. The battle is only 9 pages long. It takes up more than a quarter of the entire over 2-hour film. Okay? This book, this chapter, is 16 pages. This book goes from page 413 to 742. Okay, so what is that? 403 pages? 404, something like that? It's 16 pages out of over 400 pages. So we're going to skip a bunch. Because we're not going to talk much about the Battle of Helm's Deep. Because ultimately, what's its significance? Is it the devilry of Saruman's forces using explosive charges, at the back to try to open up Helm's Deep? Okay, maybe. Is it that they have so many orcs and the good guys seem totally outnumbered? Maybe. Or is it just that this is part of the horrors of war? And there are times when you have to seemingly ride out against insurmountable odds, which is what they do when the good guys show up. Okay? So, they make their way to Isengard, and what do they see on their way? What happens to all those orc dead? They're piled up and they're not burned, they're not buried. Yep, louder. The trees. What are called fjords. Move over them. They're kind of like the Earth's natural recyclers. They come in and move over them, and then when they leave, the orcs are gone. Okay? They purify the ground, so to speak. So they make their way to Isengard. Let's see here. Bottom of 549, top of 550. Gandalf tells them about the shepherds of the trees. And Theoden says, it's out of the shadows of legend. And there it is again. So we hear multiple times these things that were thought to be legends, thought to be wives' tales, thought to be fairy tales. They're real. I begin a little to understand the marvel of the trees, I think. I have lived to see strange days. Long we have tended our beasts in our fields, built our houses, wrought our tools, or ridden away to help in the wars and ministers. He's talking about the men of Rome. And that is, and what I've just described, we call the life of men. The way of the world. Now we could go into a whole lot here. I mean, there's been all kinds of conference stuff lately. There's been publications about Tolkien and intersectionality and colonialism and post-colonialism and Tolkien's racism and blah, 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 blah. They've all been wrong. if you want to focus on, Tolkien's, all that kind, this is what's important. Theoden says, we thought everything that had to do with us was the way of the world writ large. Okay? That's Theoden saying this. We cared little for what lay beyond the borders of our land. That is, we thought everything that occurred within our land, land here is both literal and figurative. Literal land, the borders, and figurative, what we understood the world to be. Right? Songs we have that tell of these things. What things? The things that are beyond the borders. The things that we didn't pay any attention to. But we are forgetting them. Teaching them only to children. That is, those songs are what? Fairy stories. And we teach them now only to children as a careless custom. And Theoden is kind of channeling Tolkien and suggesting maybe we ought to talk more about those things that exist beyond our borders, both the literal and the figurative things. And now the songs have come down among us out of strange places and walk visible under the sun. I had written up here for my previous class this passage from Tolkien's fairy story essay. For creative fantasy, I don't remember if I had it up for here before. Creative fantasy is founded upon hard recognition that things are so in the world as it appears under the sun. Upon a recognition of fact, but not slavery to it. And he says that, Tolkien says that, in the passage where he's starting to talk about why fairy stories are meant for adults. And in that same paragraph, he mentions Lewis Carroll. Who is Lewis Carroll? What did he write? Alice in Wonderland, Through the Looking Glass. What did he do for a living? But no. Professor of geometry at Oxford. Okay? Which means what? Can you make things up in geometry? Can you say, the Pythagorean theorem, it's what I think it is. Oh, no, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It never changes. It's always, the angles of an isosceles triangle are always 60 degrees. One never suddenly magically becomes 59 because it wants to be different. Nope. Creative fantasy, this kind of stuff, is founded upon the hard recognition things are so in the world as it appears under the sun. In other words, how the world appears is what it is. And he's saying fantasy, this kind of stuff, recognizes that. Okay? He's saying this partly against those who want to say you shouldn't read The Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter because it's pure escapist nonsense. Tolkien's saying it's not escapist in that sense. It recognizes there's a lot of crap in the world. Where do we see crap in here? Where have we seen it overcome, let's say, by Galadriel and Gimli? What could you say they figuratively represent? God. Racism, prejudice, KKK, NAACP, Arabs, Israelis, goes back, that goes back a hell of a lot longer than the KKK and NAACP. I mean, 1500 BC, 1600, 2000 BC, however far back you want to, whenever it was Abraham messed things up with his concubine, so to speak. So, it recognizes things are so in the world as it appears under the sun. But it doesn't stop there. Upon a recognition of fact, right? But not slavery to it. Notice what he says. And now the songs have come down among us out of strange places and walk visible under the sun. It are facts. Again, I think I've used this, image before. What would it do to the public consciousness if suddenly, really, truly, and you could hold it or see it, Excalibur was discovered? I mean, the real one, in incontrovertible proof. We kind of, okay, how about this one? If today, kind of over there by the, the outdoor astronomy thing, outdoor observatory, we're all in classes, people are in windows, people are walking around, and suddenly, something comes down and lands.
What, like Thor?
Yeah, 4. Well, what would even Thor prove? We're not alone. Why does SETI spend millions, SETI, search for extraterrestrial life, spend millions of dollars? Why have we sent all of these things out, to Mars, and, Voyager 1 and 2, out beyond the solar system? What's it all for? It's not just for knowledge.
Because we were kind of scared to be alone.
Exactly.
And we're scared of not being alone.
One of those two. Either we're all alone in the vast expanse of the universe, or we're not. The UAPs, what used to be called UFOs, the unidentified aerial phenomena. We read accounts of the Navy pilots, and they're kind of like, oh, it's not that they're necessarily unidentified. I mean, we've seen them. It's just we don't know where they're from. What if we get 100% incontrovertible proof? They're not from around these parts. They're not, they don't say made in China, made in Russia, made in the Magellan Galaxy. It would be a total game changer, wouldn't it? Yeah, huge, right? Because these things would now be visible walking under the sun. Gandalf, you should be glad. For not only the little life of men is now endangered, but the life also of all those things which you have deemed the matter of legend. Well, what else does that include? Beside Ints. Has Theoden met a hobbit before? Nope. Has Theoden met a Maya before? Nope. As far as he knows. There's lots of things he hasn't met before. Okay? Translate that to our world. There are people today in Britain, in England, then there are some in the United States, but the United States people are mostly white jobs. There are people in Britain who will swear on as big a stack of Bibles as you can get that they've seen the little people. And I'm not talking midgets. That they have seen leprechauns, fairies, elves. There are people who will go for a hike in the woods or through a meadow, and they will come across a fairy ring. You know what a fairy ring is? A ring of mushrooms. And they will not cross over into that ring. They will not step over those mushrooms. Why? Because part of fairy lore is that that's a portal. That's an opening to another world. And there is examples of that in literature. Okay? A lot of people say, well, that's UFOs. They've been alienly abducted by aliens. Not alienly, that's not a word. Okay? So, Theoden says, however the fortune of war shall go, and may it not so end that much that was fair and wonderful shall pass forever out of Middle Earth. Okay, I realize now there's this great big war going on, but however it ends, isn't it true that much that was beautiful and wonderful and glorious is going to leave or die? Gandalf, maybe. The evil of Sauron cannot be wholly cured, nor made as if it had not been. That's part of the hard recognition that things are so in the world as it appears under the sun. We cannot pretend, as an example, that the Soviet Union never existed. And you may not think the Soviet Union was one of these evils. I personally do. If you read much about it, it was pretty bad. Okay? Watch, by the way, The Courier on Amazon with Benedict Cumberbatch as common, ordinary, everyday British businessman who gets tied up in the espionage of the 1960s and the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay? Real story. Real story. And it ends with a clip of the real guy that Benedict Cumberbatch was portraying. Okay? But to such days we are doomed. We are doomed. Why? Because we can't change those things. We can't just wish it all away. Go back to the beginning. Frodo. I wish it need not have happened in my lifetime. Gandalf. Really? No, Sherlock. All of us wish that. But what do we have to do? What we can in the time we have. So, they make their way to Isengard, and who do they meet on what had been the outer wall of Isengard? They ride up, and they see two small figures and smoke coming out of them. Well, there's Merry and Pippin drinking and smoking weed. Pipe weed. Okay? Lying on a slab of rock. That's the rejoining. Now, notice what has happened. I didn't do this like I usually do. What happens at the end of Book 2, Fellowship of the Ring? What's that chapter title? Breaking of the Fellowship. Right? We already saw in the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, Gandalf gets killed. Okay? Breaking of the Fellowship. Sam and Frodo, they run off one direction. Merry and Pippin, they run off another direction. Boromir goes off after Merry and Pippin. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli kind of go off after Boromir. In other words, 1, 2, 3, 4, he's dead. Yeah, the threads just totally deconstruct. And then what do we start to see happening? Well, Boromir gets killed. These two get carried off, okay, by the orcs. These two, they're all on their own. He comes back from the dead, totally unexpectedly, but he comes back from the dead. And by the time we get here, what do we see happen? Gandalf, Merry and Pippin, Aragorn, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. It's like we're getting the band back together. Minus Boromir, why? Because he stays dead. And Sam and Frodo. And they're going to stay separated. Then what's going to happen? Gandalf and Pippin are going to go away. Merry's going to join up with Theoden. I almost said hook up, but that's good enough. Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli, we're going to get it broken again. Okay? So, skip a bunch. They talk, and we get to chapter 10, the voice of Saruman. Since we're supposed to start Return of the King today, I'm trying to get us as much through too tired as we can, but we're not going to get nearly far enough. So, Gandalf says, I'm going to go talk to Saruman. Aragorn, you're coming too, because this, concerns you. And he says, Theoden says, I'm coming up too, because I'm old and I don't care if I die. Gimli says, we're going. Legolas and I want to come up. Why? Because he says, bottom of 577. Gimli says, we want to see if he really does look like you. And Gandalf, it's bottom of 566. Gandalf says, if he wants to look like me, in your eyes, he will look like me. Gimli's like, I'm still going, okay? So, at the top of Orthanc, we've got Saruman and Wormtongue shows up. Gandalf, Theoden, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli. Okay? Where are the riders? Where are Merry and Pippin? They're down at the base of the tower. Okay? So Saruman comes out, and what does he say? Why did you destroy my valley? No. Well, page 578 towards the bottom, why must you disturb my rest? Its tone was that of a kindly heart aggrieved by injuries undeserved. And everybody looks up, and we're told there's this, sorry father figure-like character whose cloak, as he moves, kind of shimmers and changes colors. Gimli, like and yet unlike. And the voice keeps speaking. Says, two of you I know by name, Gandalf I know too well, but you, there, Lord of the Mark of Rowan, you're declared by your noble devices. That is, his marks of heraldry. Theoden opens his mouth because what does Saruman offer him? Peace and aid. He says, I can offer you aid, the aid that my long years of learning have given me. Theoden opens his mouth, but he doesn't speak. Gimli speaks. The words of this wizard stand on their heads. In the language of Orthanc, help means ruin. Saving means slaying. It's almost like when Tolkien gets to write this, he had read George Orwell's 1984. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. I can't remember the third motto. War is peace, freedom is slavery. Double speak, in other words. Peace, says Saruman. And when he says it, he's not all suave and sophisticated. He shows a little temper. I do not speak to you yet. And yet he knows who he is. Gimli, Glóin's son. Is that because Wormtongue showed up with a cheat sheet? Like when Biden gives a press conference, he's got pictures of all the reporters, called this one, called this one, called. No, he doesn't have that. How does he know? Wizard. That's how he knows, okay? I don't think Wormtongue tells him. So, he then addresses Theoden again. This is the second time, okay? Still Theoden doesn't answer. And Éomer replies, now we feel the peril we were warned of. Have we ridden forth to victory, only to stand at last, amazed by an old liar with honey on his forked tongue? So would the trapped wolf speak to the hounds, if he could. What aid can he give to you, forsooth? All he desires is to escape from his plight. And then he pulls out his ace. Remember Theodred at the fords. Theodred, my mind's going glitchy on me. I want to say it's Theoden's son. And the grave of Hama in Helm's Deep. They hacked his body after he was dead to pieces. Okay? If we speak of poisoned tongues, what shall we say of yours, young serpent? Oops. And he catches himself. And then he addresses Éomer, and he essentially tells Éomer that he is what? In his Lord's arsenal. You're just a gun. Shut up. Guns don't speak. Guns kill what they're aimed at. Okay? He says, if maybe you become a king, you will understand diplomacy a little more. But by the way, when Aylmer says that about like being a caged wolf, you guys are all too young to remember. The original Gulf War, 1991, and then again the second one when we marched into Baghdad. What did I almost said Osama bin Laden? What did Hussein do? When we started kicking you know what in Baghdad, he went on the air and said, well, let's sit down and talk. And we're like, dude, you're about to die. You know, why would we want to talk at this point? That's Aylmer's point. Okay? Third time he addresses Theoden. But my lord, and he pulls what he thinks is his ace. Am I to be called a murderer because valiant men have fallen in battle? What has he just done? He's equated death in war with what? Murder. In other words, he's drawn the moral, I can spell it, the moral equivalency card. Well, if somebody died in war, you know, that make me a murderer? What's the problem with that argument? He started the war.
So he pretty much made his cake and had it.
Yeah, pretty much. How can you call me a murderer if some of your guys, Theodred, your son, died in war? Because you started it, maybe. Again, Tolkien's Catholic. He fought in war. He thought war was at times justified. There's a whole Catholic doctrine of just war theory. Okay? That is, certain moral conditions have to be met before it's okay to go to war. And almost none of those conditions are to involve starting war. It must be defensive, for example. His wasn't. Okay? Finally, Theoden responds. Notice, 3 times he asks, why? I think, again, it's because of Tolkien's Catholicism. 3 times when Christ is taken into the desert, he's tempted. These are 3 temptations. How does Theoden respond? We will have peace. And several of the writers are like, yes, I can go home. I can see my wife and children and such. We will have peace. We will have peace. Notice he says it 3 times in response to each of the 3 pleas on Saruman's part. When you and all your works have perished. We'll have peace when you're dead. And everything that you have put into motion is wiped clean. And the works of your dark master to whom you would deliver us. That's the problem. See, Theoden thinks like George W. Bush. And I'm not putting down Bush there. He thinks the works of Sauron, all the works of Sauron, can be erased. Gandalf already said, not everything can be repaired. See, I think Bush made a big problem. In his speech to Congress, September 20th, 2001, when he announced the War on Terror, right? The GWOT, the Great War on Terror. What was the problem? If you've never seen the speech, watch it on YouTube. It was regarded by left and right as one of the greatest speeches in American history. Okay? But the problem in it was that he says, we will win when terror is eradicated. You can't eradicate terror. Why? Because I want this book. If there are more than one person, there will always be the possibility for terror. Put a single toy, put 2-year-olds into a playpen. 1 toy, 2 go in, 1 comes out. It's human nature. Okay? And the writers, they're like, Theoden, you're screwing us, man. You're going to get us all killed. Okay? So, Saruman totally loses his cool and reveals his real self and huffs away back into the tower. Gandalf says, not done yet. Come back. Actually, before that, he does the huffing away in a minute. Then he addresses Gandalf. And what are we told after his address to Gandalf? Top of page 582. What does, we're told, everybody think? Okay, now who does everybody probably include? Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Theoden. Gandalf would ascend into the tower to discuss deep things beyond their comprehension in the high chambers of Orthanc. The door would be closed and they would be left outside. Even in the mind of Theoden, he will betray us. He will go. We shall be lost. And then Gandalf laughs. Why does he laugh? Because in a lot of Christian theology, the devil is an ass. And what do you do with someone who's an ass? What's the best way to get at someone who's just a real jerk? It's why we have Saturday Night Live. It's why we have The Onion. It's why we have the Babylon Bee. Satire. You poke fun at them. What do proud people hate? Personal experience here. What do proud people hate? To have other people make fun of them. They want to be taken seriously. And Gandalf just laughs. I fear I am beyond your comprehension, he says. He says, but you? No, I understand you. So what does Gandalf do? He gives him a chance. He gives him a second chance. Later on, he's going to give him a third chance. Very much like Albus Dumbledore, who keeps giving people second, third, fourth, chances and such. Right? What's the chance? Help us. And I'll maybe give you your staff back once we have you leave. Right? Saruman says no. And he leaves. Top of 583. Gandalf issues a command. I did not give you leave to go. I have not finished. You have become a fool, Saruman, and yet pitiable. That is, even now I can pity you. You might still have turned away from folly and evil and have been of service. No, but you choose to stay and gnaw the ends of your old plots. And what does Gandalf do? And when he does it, what does it show? He kicks him out of the order. He says, you have no color now. Your staff is broken, and it breaks. Showing, I'm now the leader of the band. I'm now the head of the White Council. I'm now the head of the Istari, the head of the wizards. Okay? And something gets thrown, page 585, that Pippin picks up, Gandalf takes from him quickly. In 585, Pippin asks, and what if Sauron does not conquer? What will you do to him? That is, if Sauron doesn't win this battle, if we do, Gandalf, what are you going to do to Saruman when this is all over? Gandalf, I? Nothing. I will do nothing to him. I do not wish for mastery. See, what does Pippin's question presume? Gandalf's going to kill him. He's going to have a court trial, the whole 9 yards, possibly. What else? It presumes the same kind of thing Frodo presumed back in the Shadow of the Past when he said, do you mean to tell me that you and the elves have let Gollum live? Gandalf's like, yeah. It's not up to me to decide whether he dies or not. He says, I wish for no mastery. In that essay on fairy stories, Gandalf talks about, Tolkien talks about the difference between magic and enchantment. Magic involves the domination of wills and things. Enchantment is what he calls shared enrichment. Right? Daniel says, I don't want mastery. I don't want domination. Think Harry Potter. Who wants this? All throughout. Lord Voldemort. The three unforgivable curses are all about domination of wills and things. Okay? Shared enrichment means what? Have you ever found something, seen something, heard something that just blows your mind? And you want to go to somebody and say, look at this. Listen to this. Come outside, look at the sunset. Why? Because you want that person to have the experience you are having. An experience that is enlarging of the mind or soul or spirit or heart, whatever you want to put it. Okay? So, chapter 11, the Palantir. What's a Palantir? No, it is not a company in Silicon Valley. Actually, it is, but they stole the name. That one's spelled Palantyr, I believe. And I think that's how they got away from Tolkien's estate. It's a seeing stone. We would call this thing, in terms of how we make up words in modern English, a television. It allows you to see vision from afar. Okay? Who made them? The men of Westernessa. Aragorn's kin, ancestors. Right? So, because Pippin picked up this Palantir, he now has itchy fingers. And so that night when they camp, he sneaks up to Gandalf. He removes the bundle from Gandalf's, what Gandalf is wrapped in, and replaces it with a rock and goes off to look at it. Because he saw something when he held it briefly. Right? And who comes to televise with him? It's like telemedicine. Who comes to have this Zoom with Pippin? Boy, that's a pretty good analogy, too. I hate Zoom. Sauron. Who does Sauron think he's seeing? The ring bearer. And where does he think he's seeing him? Sauron knows where this Palantir is, or where he thought it was. He thinks it's in Saruman's stronghold, in the Tower of Orthanc. He says, tell Saruman, this dainty is not for him. I'm sending messengers. Okay? So Gandalf makes Pippin relive all of that and tell them all of that. And tells Pippin, and all the others, top of 594, you have been saved, and all your friends too, mainly by good fortune, as it is called. And that's the exact same phrase we saw Elrond say about everybody being called by chance. You cannot count on it a second time. That's the definition of a eucatastrophe. A sudden grace never to be recounted on to recur. What's the good fortune? That you looked into it and we saved you. That is, that he did not press, that Sauron did not press the conversation longer and discover that you aren't Frodo and that Frodo is on his way to Mordor and that Frodo is carrying the ring. Okay? So Gandalf gives it to Aragorn. Why? Louder. Because it belongs to him. It's one of the seeing stones of the men of Westernessa. Aragorn is the purest of the line of Westernessa still alive. He is the future king of Gondor. Okay? He tells him, be careful with it. And Aragorn's like, when have I ever not been careful? When have I been hasty? Right? So, Gandalf and Pippin leave. Why? Two reasons, at least. One of them is to get Pippin as far away from the Palantir as possible. Because now that he's felt it, looked into it, he's going to want to look again. So that's one reason. What's another reason? They've got to go to Minas Tirith, to Gondor, to warn Denethor. To warn him of what? Saruman's treachery. Okay? And to get prepared for all-out battle. And then we get book 4. And we have 5 minutes to do book 4. Not going to happen. Taming of Smeagol. Who's Smeagol? Why isn't it the taming of Gollum?
Because Gollum's what he became, but Smeagol like was before the ring corrupted him.
Bingo. Smeagol is the real consciousness, the real identity. Okay? How do they tame Smeagol? I'm skipping all the stuff he climbs down the cliff and jumps on him, and they jump on him and he bites them. How does Frodo tame him? He gets him to swear on the precious. And he's like, how dare you? No, I'm the precious. Okay, so what does Frodo have him swear? End of that chapter, page 618. See, this is where Frodo really needed a good course in, business law or business negotiation or contract negotiation, because he doesn't identify his terms. Frodo says, bottom of 618, down, now speak your promise. We promises, yes, I promise. I will serve the master of the precious. Good master, good spirit, go home. Now what should Frodo do at that point? Okay, we need to add some clauses here. The master of the precious. What's the problem with that? It's not necessarily Frodo. It's subject to change. It's vague. It's very ambiguous. Because the master of the precious is whoever has possession of the precious. If I get possession of the precious, then I serve myself. Okay? So, I will serve the master of the precious, comma, a.k.a., also known as Frodo Baggins, also known as Frodo Underhill, right? Right? Of number 4, Bagshot Row, also known as Bag End of the Shire in the western area of Middle Earth, Arda. Just keep filling in with phrases too. He doesn't do that. Okay? But before that happens, let's see here. Page 615. Why does Frodo tame Gollum? What does Sam want to do? Does Sam want to just let him go?
No, Sam wants to kill him.
Sam wants to kill him. Why? He's following us. He's going to be a problem. We could go back to Frodo. He's just an enemy. He deserves death. And Frodo says, yeah, but he hasn't hurt us yet. And Sam's sitting there rubbing his shoulder where he's been bit. Okay? What is Sam, go back to George W. Bush, a big believer in? Preemptive war. The preemptive death. We kill him before he kills us. It's the golden rule, kind of sullied, Frodo sees Gollum, and he plays in his mind the conversation with Gandalf, middle of 615. Very well, but I'm still afraid. And yet, as you see, I will not touch the creature. He doesn't mean he's not going to literally, physically touch him. He means I will not harm him. For now that I see him, I do pity him. Why else does he pity him? It's not only seeing him. That's part of it. Or what else is meant by seeing? Like, there but for the grace of a real Luvatar, go I. What did Frodo experience, last minute, on Ammon Hen? Remember the breaking of the fellowship? He goes up, he sits in the seat, puts the ring on after someone tries to take the ring from him. He puts the ring on. What does he see? He can look way north and he can see the orcs pouring out of the misty mountains and stuff. He turns towards the east. He sees Sauron's eye. And the eye's like shooting up beams of light. What's it doing? It's triangulating. And it's getting closer and closer and closer. And when that's happening, he starts to hear a voice. Fool! Take off the ring. Okay? He's worn the ring now more than once on this journey. What happens the more often you use the ring? The ring gets more control. Okay? All right. We will stop there. Okay, we got to finish 2 towers on whatever day, Tuesday. So finish 2 towers on Tuesday. Have a good weekend.